My name is Melanie Brummer and I am the founder of the Upcycledclothcollective. I think it's the infinite potential of cloth to become anything we want it to be. So in 1993, when I first started my first textile business, dyeing and printing fabric, when I realized for the first time that a white piece of cloth could be transformed into absolutely anything I could imagine, and that I could be in control of that transformation, from the color to the pattern to what I turn it into to the stitching I add on top of it. That infinite potential to transform, I think, is what keeps me excited. Also, I don't feel I've seen a textile until I've touched it. So for me, it's a very immersive experience. It's not just seeing it, it's knowing how it feels. And the fact that it's such an integral part of our lives. Even people who think they aren't connected to their clothes are, because nobody would leave home without them in the morning. I used to do workshops into the corporate space where I would teach corporates how to tie-dye t-shirts. And corporates would very often backpedal. It would be like, oh no, this is for hippies, this is too much color, all of that. And some of them would kind of hide behind that defense of, oh no, clothing's not my thing. And then I would say to them, well, would you leave home without your clothing in the morning? And you can't tell me it's not your thing. It's something you take with you to work every day. It's got to be your thing, So I feel that we are all connected to our clothing in some way or another, even if we don't believe we are. And for me, my clothing is a very, very, very personal journey of who I am, what I like, what I do, what I believe in, what I love, how design inspires me, all of those things. I get to experience so many parts of my creative soul through textiles. I believe it's important to be conscious of where our textiles come from, because the world is drowning in clothing. There is a landfill site in Ghana that is full of clothes that can be seen from outer space already. When we're putting that kind of a mark on the planet just with our textile waste, we have to start thinking twice. And also, there's so many people on the planet. There's so much existing clothing, like in the use stream already. So much of it can be reused, and in so many different ways. There really isn't a reason to wear something 4 or 5 times and then throw it away and say it's useless, or it's out of season. Or I've got clothing that's 50 years old that I still find a way to wear again. I really don't feel that it's necessary to churn through clothing as fast as we do. And I don't believe that the remade, upcycled style is necessarily for everybody. I know a lot of people prefer a clean, new look. I know it's not for everybody, and I think it can be for more people. Because more of us are working remotely from home, few of us are in corporate offices. The world is changing, so more of us have the opportunity to completely self-express who we are. And upcycled clothing is a great way to do that. All of the people in my community who are just doing one project at a time. For me, I don't look to the big stories, the famous people. I always look to the little guys who are doing small things. If I had to pick one in Johannesburg on our journey that we've been on in the movie, I think it would be Winnie McHenry, because she's been humble, tenacious, and self-driven. She's had no help, and she's persevered for decades. You know, we've met a lot of people in our story who are upcycling and thrifting now because it's becoming trendy. When he was doing it 20 years ago, when nobody knew what it was, when everyone said, "Are you mad?" She's taken on staff in the process. She's paid salaries through COVID, for goodness sake. So I think she'd have to be my personal icon in our story. So the two that stood out for me really were Hotel Hope Interiors. Stood out for me because they're supporting little babies. The fundraising that they're doing in their store feeds children that have no parents. So for me, that's incredible. And then also the overcoats story, because they offer such a wonderful opportunity for people to be dignified and create their own jobs. It doesn't have to be an undignified process. I can walk in with my $200, I can buy something, I can turn my money over, come back, do it again. And the dignity in that process that it gives everybody, that anybody out there can start a business. Anyone with a few friends who'll buy some coats. So I find their business model very uplifting and encouraging in a country where the government doesn't know how to create jobs. That would be the other one. The two that stood out for me were those two, definitely. Winnie and I, the other day when we were talking, we figured out where it all started. So when the internet was still fairly new and people were kind of building directories for things, it was very fashionable to create a website that was a directory for something. My guess is that this would have to go back 2005. Must have been 2005, somewhere around there. Winnie had a craft directory. Called Crafty Corner or something like that, where I listed my tie-dye kits on her website. And that was how we met. I think we met somewhere online, possibly at a networking event. And she was all over the place with Crafty Corner at that time, and I was all over the place with my tie-dye kits at that time. So I ended up listing on her little website. I don't know if I think I got 2 or 3 orders out of that listing. And I don't know what happened to Crafty Corner after that. And then she started Upcycle. And she was running it from her house. And I think in 2014, I taught a couple of workshops at her house. So for about 3 or 4 months, I went there and I taught on a Sunday, or Saturday or a Sunday. And I did a few workshops at her house where we pulled in my customers and hers, and we did a thing there. And then, of course, I put all the pictures on Facebook to show. So I was a traveling teacher, and my network always found it interesting to see me teaching in different places. So it was wonderful to show everybody where I was teaching at Crafty Corner. At one stage, her husband, Mark, helped me to build my website. And then I didn't see them for a long time. And then when I came back to Joburg to work on this project, I saw that Winnie was still going. And many of the people in Joburg who I spoke to, when I said, who do you think I should interview for this? They all said, you have to speak to Winnie. And I was like, okay, I've got her on my list. So that was how we ended up collaborating again. We've connected again in collaborative ways over the years. And Winnie is always ready to do good work that will promote what she does. She has a very pure heart for skills development and training. And she really just wants other people to understand the power that's in their hands, to be self-employed if you want to, and to show people what she can do so that they can do it for themselves. And she has a perseverance that most people who tackle these things lack. Because the fact that she's still around doing it decades in is a testament to her resilience, her toughness, and her true dedication to what she does. Everything she does is self-funded, and she finds practical ways to pay to do the things that she wants to do because she knows that it's important that somebody does it in the world. And it's that I admire about her the most. So the thing that I found about U-Turn that is surprising is their success rate. I have over the years interacted with many non-profits where they attempt to support homeless people and move them off the street, out of addiction, and into a working life. Many have tried and failed. And the fact that they have a model that's working so successfully is extremely impressive. They clearly invest a lot in personal development for participants in their programs. They have a lot of emotional support that they put around participants, but also really impressive practical support. Like the fact that they find out specifically from each participant, what do you want to do? What is it you're interested in going into? And then finding places where they can get that specific work experience, I think is also hugely powerful. So the professionalism, the level at which they're doing it, their success rate, that store, when you walk in there from a customer experience perspective, so many of the thrift stores that we go into, some of them are like rummaging through dirty bins. It's like a scratch patch and they've got that musty smell. This place you walk in and everything is clean and pristine and on hangers and sorted. And there's a change room, and the customer experience is so beautiful. So I think they've got a lot right, because when your customer experience is comfortable and beautiful like that, people are going to buy, which means that they've also got the money flow. They've got their focus and their priority on the money flow in the business right, so that it supports all the other stuff they do. And that's also not common in a nonprofit. They understand how to maximize on opportunities. So when items are donated, they very carefully sort and sift through them. And when they find brand labels that they know people aspire to own, they sift them out and they put them into their online store, because they know that in their online store, they are more inclined to get a better price for things than directly in the shop. What I also find interesting about their kind of triage process, so they sort the stuff in different grades, is they also don't let stuff clutter up their space. So then they know that their retail floor space is like, they need to maximize on that. So they don't let anything hang around for too long. If it doesn't sell quite quickly, then it gets moved down to a lower price point, and even into a different store where that price point and that buyer are present. So I find the way that they understand their sales process and their sales timeline. How long can we afford to hold a thing before it needs to move on and it's no longer paying rent in the store? I find that very interesting. And then also the fact that they have a plan for everything. As the stuff goes down the quality rungs, by the time it gets right to the bottom and nobody wants to buy it, it then goes into bags and then is donated or sold at a very, very discounted price to people who can still manage to take that huge sack of clothing and sell those items for very small amounts. So your street hawkers and your informal hawkers are finding a way to use their waste in a productive way. So there's nothing that goes into their system that's wasted, and everything finds its place at the highest price point it possibly can, so that none of the value in the system is wasted. It's quite an interesting trend that we've seen in the charity shops that we've been through in this process, is to see how they make the most of the resources that are given to them by their donors. And it's very interesting. Most of them have realized that they get more money online than in their brick and mortar stores. So what they're doing is they're sifting out the cream of the donations. And those actually go straight onto their online platforms, and they sell them there for a lot of money. And having spoken to some of the store owners, what that also does is it protects them from theft. Because if one of those big tag items is stolen in their store, then it's problematic. Whereas if they can keep it safely in their offices and then put them out onto the online store, they then get top dollar for that donation. Then from there, they will normally have a curated rail somewhere that's easy for people to find, that has all the brand names on that people are going to look for and that people will pay more for. And then as you move through the store and you get to the scratch patches where they've just got piles of things, that's where you know the stuff is going to be cheap. And it also seems to be a challenge for some of the stores that they need to move their stock. So they don't hang on to the low price items. What they will do with those is they will bag them up and sell them to informal traders and hawkers who will come and buy these big bags of the lower grade items that they've then baled up at a good price, that then gives them an opportunity to buy, say, 100 pieces for 100 Rand. Sell those pieces on at 10 Rand a piece, and in that way cobble together a living. As what I found very, very interesting is that as far as you go in South Africa, very, very little ends up in landfill. Very little of the stuff here actually ends up in landfill. There always seems to be somebody further down the food chain who can use it before it even becomes rags. What I also found very interesting that I learned through the course of shooting this documentary is that South African law actually protects our clothing industry fairly well in terms of what we can import that's secondhand. Legal textile imports into South Africa include used coats and rags for automotive use and that kind of thing, which is very interesting. Going back to what I said earlier, that I think we don't have a lot of stuff making it even to rags. Most of our textiles get absorbed by our poorer class. And so that any imported clothing that's coming in bales that is not either an overcoat or a rag is actually an illegal import. And that I'm finding quite interesting. I'd be curious to know where they come from, why they're still coming in and how. Yes, just very interested to learn that South Africa doesn't have a huge landfill problem like Ghana when it comes to textiles, which is encouraging and hopeful for us, that we're not drowning in mountains of textiles from Europe. So the reason I visited Cape Town for part of our narrative is because Lucretia Splinters talked me into doing the pitch for the Facebook Accelerator program. And she for months kind of coached me and coaxed me and encouraged me, and every time my imposter syndrome said, this is not for me, she said to me, why shouldn't this be for you? So she encouraged me to send in my pitch for the Accelerator program, and I'm so thankful. And we'd been talking for months over the phone about how we were going to get together as soon as we had a chance. So of course, when we started rolling out the program, I felt I had to go down and speak to her and meet with her and just connect properly. And then also, Lucretia is in an area of Cape Town where people were very, very, very marginalized previously. It's an area that is known for its crime, an area that's known for its difficulties. And I wanted to see what Upcycled Textiles were doing there. So it was a great way for me to deep dive into Lucretia's little world and find out in her world how Upcycled Textiles were playing a role. And of course, as soon as we went in there, we found at her market 4 traders. I mean, it's a tiny market. And there were 4 stallholders there with upcycled and thrifted goods. So it shows that even in a microcosm, in a market where there might only be 20 traders, if there are 4 of them who are using upcycled textiles to support what they're doing, then upcycled textiles are playing a huge role, a significant role in growing that little economy in that little area. So it was an opportunity for us to dive deep into a small area, and also just an opportunity for me to give something back to Lucretia and her area and her community. So we went into the Mitchell's Plain Entrepreneurs Hub, as they call it, and we upskilled some of the ladies there in the community. We did some workshops with them. And it was just a wonderful way to give something back to Lucretia for encouraging me to get over myself and apply for this thing. It's been such an exciting journey, and I would never have done this if it wasn't for her. Yes, we stayed in Mitchell's Plain. It was awesome. I stayed in Lucretia's home with her family. I got to meet her beautiful children. She's got twin sons. And it was just amazing to connect with her. I love my online community manager families, the people I've met online through being a community manager. And the biggest frustration for me is that I can't reach out and hug them and smell them and feel them. And for me, it was a very important closure to be able to go to Lucretia and just touch her and say hello. And then, of course, Jabola was also coming to Cape Town. So Lucretia is a previous alumni from an earlier cohort. Jabola is one of the alumni from our current cohort, and he came to Cape Town for an event. So I had an opportunity to meet him in person. And I realized that if in my planning, I planned things carefully, I could see Jabola and Lucretia while I was there. So that's what I did. That's what I did. Interestingly enough, I can remember my very first interaction with Facebook. In the early 2000s, when I was working into the fashion industry, we used to have a monthly meeting where fashion designers would just get together to network at Tokyo Star in Melville. And we enjoyed it because they had vodka in their slush machine. And we used to get together there, I think it was on a Thursday night, and talk about all sorts of fashion stuff and network and share ideas and things like that. And one night, one of the fashion designers arrived and said to me, "Have you heard of this amazing new thing that you can join called Facebook?" And I was quite interested. It sounded like a great way to connect with people. So immediately I went and created my profile and started my Facebook profile. But back then I used it mostly to connect with friends and family, and obviously to talk to these fashion designers that I was networked in with. I started using it more seriously, I would say probably around 2010, when I published my first book, and when I started to travel around the country to teach, because I had a roadshow. And people love a roadshow, and it was a way of getting it out there and sharing it with others. So I would create this narrative as I traveled around the country to show people where I was teaching, who I was teaching, all the wow moments, because of course we were tie-dyeing t-shirts a lot, and I'd work the workshop up to this crescendo where all the kids would open their t-shirts together. I would always share those wow moment pictures on Facebook. So Facebook was very much a part of my journey when I was teaching. And then in 2015, when I moved to the farm to live with Pete, I'd been traveling to teach for many years, and I was tired, and I needed to pivot the business and re-engineer it. And I'd been thinking for a long time about how I would be able to create a business that I could run from anywhere, a remote business around what I did. And what I'd come up with was to create a suite of online courses. And those were essentially the workshops that I'd been teaching in person, but now I wanted to put them online so that I could teach more people around the globe, and I could become a global teacher as opposed to being a local teacher. And I remember very boldly saying to my friends and family, I'm going to create a remote business, I'm going to become a world-known brand, and I'm going to use Facebook to do it. And that was 2016. And looking back now, I realize how brave that was, and quite interesting, because I was quite an early adopter. I was one of the first people in my industry back then thinking of doing it. And that was when I decided to use Facebook. The reason I decided to kind of drill into Facebook was because at that time it had the most users. Everyone was there every day. It was free, it was accessible, it had the most users, and it was growing continuously. So to me, it made perfect sense that would be the platform to back. Then, how did I become a community manager? That really was by accident. So I started the Upcycled Cloth Collective with the intention of reaching as many people as possible with the message. What I didn't realize was that in stepping into doing that, I was becoming a community manager. It's interesting that back then I didn't equate the two. It was like, I want lots of people in a following. I didn't realize that I would have to manage those people who were following me, which is, I think, perhaps an oversight that happens to a lot of people, because sometimes the transition from being I'm just in business for myself to, okay, I have a whole community I need to serve, and what is the greater good within that context, can be quite a tricky one. And also, it's all very well and good to go on that journey, but how do you pay your bills while you're doing it? I started this community, it grew virally, and then it started pushing back, and I had to learn to be a better community manager. I was approached by somebody at Facebook and invited to join a group that they had specifically for community managers from sub-Saharan Africa who had communities around social causes. And I was pulled into this group with about 1,000 other community managers from around sub-Saharan Africa. And I began learning with the Meta mentors. And that was really where my faith in Facebook grew exponentially, because I was receiving direct mentorship from somebody at Meta. And they were showing me how to use their tools and connecting me with other community managers who were also doing a great job of managing their communities. And it gave me a way to benchmark what I was doing. So in my group on Facebook, I'd faced a lot of naysayers and a lot of criticism, often from community managers of other groups. And because I've got that little voice in my head that is quite good at going to, what did I do wrong first? I felt that I was doing a really bad job of running my community. And then when I was exposed to meta mentors and other community managers running their groups, I realized that actually I was doing quite a good job. I wasn't making as much of a mess of things as I'd allowed myself to believe. And it helped me to take a step back and realize that actually I'm pretty good at what I do. That same learning group, those same mentors then invited me to become certified as a Facebook community manager. So Facebook now have a program that you can do, and you can be certified as an online community manager, Blueprint certified, which means that you know how to grow and run a community in terms of current best practice standards. The certification lasts for 2 years, and then you have to renew it, which means that your skills always have to be updated in real time. And the irony of this accelerator process has been that it's kept me so busy that my certification has lapsed. And when I'm done with accelerating, I'm going to have to sit down and study and do my certification over again, because this accelerator has been so full on that I allowed my certification to lapse because my focus was elsewhere. I had other priorities. And that's a lot. Facebook is foundational to everything I do, as is community management. I now have 200 groups on Facebook. For a while in the period between 2016 and getting certified, I'd kind of wandered around in the group space, experimenting with things. So I just kept creating groups for every good idea I had. And in fact, one of my groups, how to start and run a business with very little money, is like a freight train at the moment. We're on 80,000 members and growing with 100 new members a day. So that was one of my little experiments where I named a group for the most common search terms that people would commonly use on a certain topic. And that's what happened. So yes, Facebook is foundational to everything I do. I think that the Meta suite of products, Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, are the most powerful opportunity for anybody with a business or a social cause to bring voice to the work that they're doing. And I think anybody who's not using them is missing out. It's simple, you're missing out. Very badly. When I started building my online courses, I rushed onto Thinkific and populated 40 courses, all of the ideas that were in my head. But I was very, very good at course building and not very good at selling them. They failed to launch. My Thinkific platform essentially failed to launch. And what happened was I hit the market early. I was a very early adopter, so there was heavy pushback, especially in some of the Facebook groups where they'd never seen anything like that before. I was told I was not allowed to do it. I was told I would be reported. I received hate mail. I had people hunting me down all over to send me hate mail because I had the cheek to try to sell something in my Facebook group, in my own community that I'd started. Because back then it wasn't very common. So I was an early adopter, and then because I got such hard pushback in the early stages, I think I burned out. I remember going into hiding for about a year during 2018 where I didn't know which way to go because every call to action that I put out on Facebook either got hate mail or negative pushback or worse still, just crickets. Nothing happened. And in the face of all the negativity, none of the positive voices were speaking up. There were lots of people who knew me, who knew what I did. But if you've got one person who says this is a scam, they won't touch you for years. Nobody will follow you. And I even had groups started by people like that who started them. So we had a competitor group that started out where they named their group exactly the same as ours. They just took the hyphen out of the name. And then they spent the first 2 months in a dedicated way slagging me off in their group because they'd by then been removed from mine. To the degree that someone eventually 2 months in said, if you hate this woman so much, why do you keep talking about her every day? Like, can we get on and now talk about our own topic in our own group? So they eventually go away and the damage is done. So for a very, very long time, I was unable to sell my courses and I gave up on them. And then along came Patreon and I tried Patreon. I tried turning my courses into packages that people could subscribe to. And I built that out. And for about 6 years, every 6 months, I would reskin Patreon and make it look different. Every 6 months, all the videos that I watched around Patreon said that you somewhere along the line will find your packaging. So most Patreon creators will build their Patreon platform out. And then what will happen is they'll get to somewhere between $300 and $500 in revenue. And then they plateau. And essentially what happens is that your friends and family they buy in, and then you plateau until you find that thing that people really want. And that's when you then scale. So every 6 months, I would really look at what I'd done on Patreon and say, okay, how do I rejig it? How do I make it look a little bit different so that maybe it'll be more attractive to my community members? But because my community members are a little bit older and don't understand this internet stuff very well, it all sounded too foreign to them. And a lot of them were very, very dubious to buy in. So every 6 months, I'd redo Patreon. And I eventually got Patreon up to that $350 plateau. And that's where I got stuck. And if you do the conversion in any country, $350 a month is not a lot to live on. Hence, during that period, I was not paying my bills very well because I had very small amounts trickling in from Thinkific. I had small amounts trickling in from Patreon. I kept trying other ideas. I created a podcast. I tried merchandise. I tried adding merchandise to my Patreon. I tried almost everything that any content creator out there can try. And nothing quite got the traction that I needed it to. And there were a number of reasons that it was happening. The energy was dispersed across different platforms. When my customers came to pay, it was very confusing because they'd find me on Upcycledclothcollective, but their payment would go through something different that was called something completely different. So they weren't so sure if it was legit. And then, of course, those voices in the background going, this is a scam, whatever they decided to shout out, that would then, people would go, oh, well, I'm not sure, so I'm not going to try. It's not safe. And then the Facebook Accelerator program. Somebody I knew in the Sub-Sahara learning group chatted with me about it and said I should do it. Many of my mentors said I should do it. And then another previous participant, so a couple of the alumni who've participated before, had chats with me and convinced me that I should try. My imposter syndrome had told me that it wasn't for me. And I'd tried the year before, but I'd sent in a terrible pitch. Talk about self-defeating behavior. I had sent in the most awful pitch, knowing that it wouldn't get anywhere. So last year, I crafted a way more intentional pitch, sent it through, and was accepted. And then had to figure out what to do with the biggest opportunity that had ever come my way. So your question is a long one.
Yeah.
Facebook underpins everything I do. I wouldn't have an income without them, and I wouldn't have a community, and I certainly wouldn't have the journey of learning I've had. It's been, community management has been, I always say community management is personal development 101 combined with international communications. Because you have to have an understanding of just how elastic language is. And that thing that is what you think you've heard me say, what I think I wanted to tell you. You know, there's so much that gets lost in the cracks in communication. And for me, that's been the fascinating part about community management is learning to understand how we communicate and learning to communicate around our collective triggers within our different frameworks. Okay, so the Facebook Community Accelerator program is something that Facebook does every year. It's been going on, I think, for 3, 4, 5 years now, possibly a little bit longer. They keep changing it. So they piloted it, and then they changed it a little, they changed it a little, and every year, it's a little bit different. This year, what it entailed, we had to send in a pitch to explain to them why us. And they selected 160 community managers who have groups that are working towards positive social change in some way. So 160 of us were selected from around the world, and we've all got groups that do different things. So some of the groups include Trotro Diaries, where they talk about the public transport experience in Ghana. Pucky Spriggs has Graphic Designers Africa, and it's a group for graphic designers specifically in Africa, and they do amazing training and all sorts of stuff to help young designers improve their skills and find work. Motorcycle Diaries Africa, Gish and Giri started a group for guys who want to buy themselves a scooter and travel around Africa on a small budget. But you know, these guys buy their scooters and can't ride them very well. So then they need to go through a whole experience of learning how to ride and safety on the road and all of that kind of thing. And that's what that group is supporting. Saratu has a group that helps women who struggle with fertility in Nigeria. So we've got all these groups that are working on social causes, improving things in society. That individuals have, they're just groups of people who've gone, I have an idea, I'm going to start a group on Facebook, and the next thing they have these massive communities, and they're changing the world in positive ways. So in our South African cohort, we have Nkumisa Ngelo, who's got One Family, One Stockpile, and she teaches women how to save. And Pamela Padiachi has a group called Women Pact, and she works very much around gender-based violence in KwaZulu-Natal. So it's all people who are working on social causes. We were given a grant and some mentorship. So we spent a few very rigorous months in learning about new Facebook tools, learning better ways of using them, learning from our peers how they're using the tools, giving feedback directly to Meta. about how we are using their tools, because it's interesting, they've built all these things, but they come to us to figure out how we're using them, because we actually up the game for them, because we're on there every day. And then, so in November, we were given a portion of the money to kind of set ourselves up and get computers and inverters and things like that, so that we could just stabilize our work. And then we had to come up with what they called a CIP, Community Initiative Plan, which was basically to tell them how we plan to use the rest of the money that they were going to give us. And when I rolled out my Community Initiative Plan, it involved starting a new website for the group, adding a magazine subscription to that, adding a new online course to the website, and then creating what I called back then a cascade of content that I wanted to put out to let people know in the group about the website and all the new stuff I was creating. I've been able in the last 6 months to effect a pivot that was long overdue, a brand pivot, where I closed down all the old business structures that weren't serving me. I've registered a new PTY Limited. It has new bank accounts. We have 2 new bookkeepers who have the bookkeeping current and up to date in real time, which is a first for me. Normally, I'm just a pile of papers in a bag. I'd have to say that's the most significant change in my business, is all the reporting. So all of that is done. We've launched a new website. On the website, we have the ability for our members to subscribe to a magazine. Next week, with some luck, we will be launching a new online course that our members will be able to subscribe to from the website. And the learning content in there is going to be co-created by the whole community. It's not just me putting my workshops up there. It's the whole community are working together to put up different chapters to answer different questions of beginners in our group. And we're going to make it really affordable and accessible, very low subscription amount, but it means that it's accessible to everybody. And that subscription will then create sustainability in the business structures so that I can afford to pay those bookkeepers, the web developers, the people who are helping me to film all this content, the admin teams that are now needed to do all the extra stuff that comes with having a proper registered business with all sorts of extra stuff and staff and that kind of thing. On top of all of that, we're making a documentary to explain how upcycled and reused textiles are creating social, economic, and environmental impact in South Africa. And my hope with the documentary is that members around the globe in the Upcycled Cloth Collective will respond by telling their stories so that we can really amplify the voice of what we're doing, so that more people can become aware of just how important textiles are to the human story. Clothing is important to all of us. It's a part of our daily lives. And if we ignore the effects that our consumer and clothing habits are having on the planet, we're being irresponsible global citizens. Okay, so to actually apply for the Community Accelerator, I have to say a number of people. It was Michael Manning, who was running the Sub-Sahara group at the time. It's subsequently been closed down in Facebook's restructuring. Michael Manning is one of the men I admire the most in Africa. He has a heart for collaboration and a very optimistic view that Africa's time has come to shine. And he grows people in the most incredible way. Everybody he touches has a better life for his influence. He not only talked me into doing the Accelerator, he also was pivotal in my application going through. So there were some glitches with the application process.
And along the way, he mentioned to me that he hadn't seen my application. And I was like, I definitely sent it in. It is definitely there somewhere. Saratu's also sent hers in, and she's also heard nothing back. So we were able to gather up a few of the lost sheep and get them all through the process because he was on it. Lucretia Splinters, who participated last in the previous cohort, had a long conversation with me to say, get over yourself, you can do this, you need it. Imagine what would happen if you succeed. You're going to bring more than R500,000 in revenue into our country. That's important enough to try. Violet Dove, also a previous participant, a previous alumni, also had a long conversation with me. Mel, you can do this. Don't be afraid. My fellow cohort, actually, there were a few of us who were sending in pictures at the same time. We kind of sat on the ledge together. So when we were waiting to hear, we were like, oh my goodness, this is so nerve-wracking. And they actually got me through the process because we worked on our pictures together beforehand, and we sat together waiting. And then being in learning sessions with them afterwards and getting to know them over the last year has just been quite magical. So Lucretia Splinters participated in the Accelerator last year, and she talked me into sending in my pitch for this year. I would never have done it. Hers was the final conversation that pushed me. She was the one that pushed me, and she kept coming back on WhatsApp every day and going, have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? So when I was accepted, I really felt like I should take her with me. And also, Facebook's funding through Lucretia went into a community in South Africa that has been previously disadvantaged and disempowered and disenfranchised for a very long time. And the little voice inside of me said, what would it look like if 2 years of energy go into this place and see what they could do? And what if I work with Lucretia to do something there? So although I had a wider story to tell, a national story to tell, I felt I had a unique opportunity to go deep by working with Lucretia and into her community, because I know that the same textile story that we see everywhere else will be present in Lucretia's environment. So we went into Mitchell's Plain to see what textile upcycling looks like there, and how it dovetails into Lucretia's world. And we saw it very beautifully. So Lucretia, part of her community development work that she's doing down there is to support entrepreneurs in the area, teach them how to use social networks more powerfully, and teach them to network more powerfully. And she's built a market that she runs in their local community center. And so we went into that market, and I interviewed some of the traders there, and we found that 4 of them are using upcycled and recycled textiles to start little businesses in that market. So her story is very relevant to mine. We also there in her community found a wonderful skills development center that is teaching teenage mothers skills that they can use to feed their babies and create their families and create businesses for themselves, so that they don't feel that they don't have a future, and that they have skills that they can use in a very practical way to earn a living. And with all these people in Lucretia's environment, there was every reason to go in there and tell her story.
If you are out there wanting to start a side hustle with upcycled textiles, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can do it. I've seen people just approach their friends and family and say, listen, I'm starting a little thrifting business, give me your old clothes that you don't want. And very often that's a good enough way to start a business. I've seen people start with their own clothes they end up with a wardrobe of clothes that they no longer wear. You can find local markets. You can find where they import bales of secondhand clothing. I've seen people start businesses by just buying and selling the clothes exactly the way they are. Or you can completely transform them into other functional items and other styles of garments, which is also a great way of doing it. I would recommend that you start online with your marketing though, because it seems as though online is working for a lot of people. Although all the traders I speak to do eventually end up in some kind of a market or a pop-up shop or a brick and mortar store somewhere. But I also think it depends on your market. So I think, and you know, if your customer is somebody who typically likes to walk around a market and find beautiful objects like a magpie, then it might be a good place for you. If you're doing something that's very, very intricate, that you really need to charge a lot of money for, then a gallery space might be better for you. If you're just doing functional, ready-to-wear clothing, then I think markets are a good place. I think the most important advice I can give is to just start. Don't be afraid. It's very easy to start a thing and then go, oh dear, this is not working, I'll adjust it and change it a little bit. It's much easier to do that than to just sit in analysis paralysis and wait for the perfect moment, because that'll never ever happen. So I'm a great one for jump in and just do it. I think because I started my first business when I was 23 years old and I just jumped in and did it. I often look back and think to myself, if I'd known then how little I knew and how much trouble I was in, I might not have tried it. And sometimes not knowing is great, because sometimes the fear that comes with knowing is also a hindrance to the process. So I would say just get up, just do it. Try it if you're thinking about it. Just do it. So I think that the digital world is the textile industry's best chance of growing. I think in South Africa, it's changing the way things work. And today, your entire fashion industry can get together in one Facebook group and have a conversation about any topic. You can find your suppliers way easier than we used to. You can compare with supplier pricing. Designers are not working in silos in the same way that they used to. And then, of course, depending on who your target market is, technology is a great way of selling your products these days. So there's Facebook Marketplace. You can create your Facebook pages. You know, you used to have a website to have any kind of presence. Now you can create a Facebook page for free. So it's not customized, it doesn't look like you, but it's got all the functionality in that you need. And then the one that I think is overlooked quite a lot by the fashion industry, that holds a lot of selling power, is WhatsApp. I think if more fashion designers can start to gather their customers into WhatsApp lists and start to send them in those lists pictures of things that they know they'll like, it's an easy, free, quick way to reach customers that costs you nothing. You know, a little bit of time in the morning to send out some pictures. And it's very easy to make the kinds of pictures that you need for a small device like that. You don't need to employ fancy photographers. If you're a startup, it's very, very easy to create something that looks like something that you can put onto WhatsApp using an app like Canva or something like that. So I think that any designer who's not out there today on socials, you're doing yourself a disservice, because there are so many places that you can use to get out there and reach customers that we just didn't have 30 years ago. I think that technology is the best thing that's ever happened to all of us from a business perspective.
The young entrepreneurs that I met at Picnic and Thrift were absolutely amazing. They were fantastic. And what I loved about them was their youth and optimism and their readiness to step into entrepreneurship. So I first stepped into entrepreneurship when I was 23 years old. And it was such a rush for me at that age to understand that I could actually earn my own money. Like, really? I can make my own money. I don't have to depend on a boss. I just have to show up, make sure I do the job, and make sure I deliver, and the money will come in. And that for me was quite a magical mindset shift. And also for me, what I feel is that step into entrepreneurship you only have to do once. Whereas if you work for a boss, you can be fired again and again and again. So I find that optimistic and courageous step, the fact that I saw so many young people doing that at Picnic and Thrift, filled my heart with joy, because that's how we're going to solve unemployment in this country, is with more young people understanding, look, let's just step into our own power, because we can't wait for anybody else to give us solutions on a plate anymore. So what encouraged me about them was that we spoke to people who were 20 years old and had already been in business for 3 or 4 years. That was really impressive to me. They've got a whole 8-year head start on me. 6 or 8 year head start on my mindset, you know, that gives them a whole other decade in business, which is an amazing thing. So I think that what I saw at Picnic and Thrift is a young generation who are ready to step into entrepreneurship with courage, and I think they're setting a beautiful example for the rest of the country. So that would have had to have been in 1993. My career started in 1993 when I'd been working in casinos for 4 years, dealing blackjack, poker, and roulette. And it's kind of a hallmark of casinos is that your croupiers sit in the tea room at the back during their breaks and talk about how they plan to get out one day. And I knew I had to get out. I didn't enjoy the job that much. It sounds very glamorous. Being a croupier sounds very glamorous until you're about 4 years in and you haven't seen the daylight. I decided I needed to get out, and I was dating a guy who said, why don't we make some t-shirts and we'll sell them outside the nightclubs at night, because that's what he'd done to make some money. And we tie-dyed some t-shirts together. He still taught me about tie-dye. I'd never heard of tie-dye in my life before, and I looked at this book and we made some shirts and we took them to a nightclub, and it was horrible. It was cold. We didn't make a lot of money. I had to pack up in the freezing cold. When I got home, I was frozen. And I eventually said to him, no, I'm taking this to a regular market. I think it'll do better there. And he went his way and I went my way, and the market worked really well for me. So then I ended up with a flea market stand selling tie-dyed t-shirts and dresses and trousers and all sorts of things. And I did that for about 6 years, quite intensively. So I would say that was where my career began. Was with me one day saying to my friends, I'm going to be self-employed. I'm starting a t-shirt business. I'm going to the plaza to buy 20 t-shirts and you can buy them from me on the weekend at the market. And it really was that simple for me. It was about, how did Vanya Mangaliso say it? Buy low, sell high. And I added on my little added value, my color, my personality to be able to get that prize. So in the 1990s, it would have been hallmarked by the rainbow spiral, because that is what the people who were coming into my stand at the market were buying. That rainbow spiral, I could make as many as I wanted, and they would sell every weekend. So that was driven by market demand. So it wasn't really mine.
Then when I took it to the fashion industry, most of the fashion designers had a very clear idea of what they wanted. So I worked more like a dry cleaner when I worked into that part of the industry, where they would come to me with a very specific look and ask me to create that for them or replicate it for them. I did a lot of replication. And knowing what I know now, like it's a horrible copyright infringement, but people would actually come to me with pictures and say, please will you copy this? Many designers would come and say, please would you copy this look, this feel? And in terms of copyright around dyed finishes, there really can't be any, because people have been dyeing textiles with this tie-dye method for thousands of years. It's been around for 4,000 years. There's no part of the technique we can claim to own, because people have been doing it forever. So there's a very interesting copyright conversation around that we can't even get into today. Hence my group, Copyright, Copy Wrong on Facebook, where we can talk about that at more length. So the work that I did during that era wasn't really mine. I didn't really have a distinctive look or feel, because a lot of the look and feel was driven again by consumer need. When I created my books, even my books were driven by what does my student need to learn. I've got a body of hand-carved lino stamps, which would be the nearest to what does Melanie look like. And I've made them over 25 years. And they've taken on a look of their own. And I suppose I don't view them that much commercially. This is one of them. I don't view them that much commercially because I've never sold them commercially on any kind of large scale. So they were always little one-offs that I made, small pieces of fabric that I sent out to people that I knew for the Global Make and Share project, or people I didn't know for the Global Make and Share project, but I haven't mass-produced anything. So it's not like you can go out there and buy a Melanie Brummer original. If you've got something that I've made, it's very rare and precious at this point in time. And it's quite funny, because when I was making tie-dye for my friends back in the 1990s, I'd always say to them, you better hang on to this, it's going to become collectible. And now it has. I haven't dyed a garment since 2015. I would only make something now for a tutorial or some kind of educational content that I was trying to create. Or there are a few items that I make for myself. But I've now moved on to stitching. I love stitching. So my things that I make to me from me are heavily stitched these days. It's quite funny, because people come to me and say, can you make me a tie-dye t-shirt? And I'm like, when last did you actually read my messaging? I haven't made those in 20 years. But it's interesting how people often pigeonhole you in a place and don't realize that I've evolved, and how many incarnations I've evolved through. So now I would say, if you want to know how do you know that you're in a Melanie Brummer space, it's when you're in a group on Facebook where things are run smoothly, there's an admin team in place, and everybody's being kind to each other. That would be how you know you're near me. The clothing industry in South Africa has changed a lot. Cheap Asian imports have killed us. We have almost no clothing manufacturing sector. Most of the machinists who used to earn money from sewing garments are without work. Most of the CMT factories have shut down. So my personal feeling is that our clothing industry got destroyed by two forces. One was the cheap Asian imports from the outside, and then the unions on the inside choked the industry, and there's very little of it left. In my mind, we're at that inflection point where things change. So I'm feeling quite optimistic
because there's nothing left. Now we can start rebuilding it finally. The rebuild, I don't hold out much hope for though, because for it to happen, consumer demand needs to be there, and it's not there. Your average South African consumer does not support the average South African maker. And until that happens, South African makers are going to struggle, are going to continue to be struggling artists and artisans. I feel it's my role to help South African consumers to understand how important it is that we start to support local. Like every time you buy a garment locally, you're supporting a local maker, you're supporting a local industry, you're keeping the money in the country. You're putting food on the table for somebody who is across the room that you can touch. And I think that we need to start caring about that. You know, not just making these kind of impersonal purchases. It's just product, we don't care where it comes from. So I think that the opportunities are changing because we now have the internet, we now have technology that's supporting us. Small designers can make a huge name for themselves just using Instagram these days. So I think opportunities have changed a lot. There's a lot of work we still need to do. And like I say, I'm optimistic because it's work for me to do. It's work for all of us to do. It's a place to dig in. It's not something to have despair about. There's a massive need in the market. Let's fill it. Imagine how many jobs we could create if all South Africans started focusing on buying local, buying handmade, buying artisan made. That would really warm my heart. And imagine how beautiful we'd all look in artisan made clothing. It would be so gorgeous. What a rich feast for the eyes. Every time you walk down the street, you just see all this stuff. South African artists have got so much, and we don't see enough of it. Even in the studio here where we're shooting today, they've got garments hanging all over the walls that are hand painted, and nobody gets to see them. So for me, I'd like to challenge every South African to buy local, pick a handful of local designers and artisans, and just support the hell out of them. That's how we can change the world. And then Upcycled Textiles, how they've changed. I think, so when you speak to anyone in our group, they'll tell you that Upcycled Textiles came from generations back, during the war. And before that, you know, people always valued textiles more highly many, many years ago because it wasn't so easy to produce. These days it comes off rolls so cheap and fast. So it was more mindfully made, it was a better quality, there was less of it, and we valued it for longer. So upcycling isn't new, it's very old. The fact that it's trending now is awesome. Because it means that hopefully more people will do it. And I still think that it's not going to become mainstream. Because there are so many people out there in the world who are clawing their way out of poverty. And for them to be seen with something that has a hole in or that's needed to be mended is almost an admission of defeat. When you have people who are aspiring to get out of poverty, they will aspire to shiny things. And it's not my place to say, you can't have that thing. So I'm not sure how we're going to tackle the challenge of making people more aware. And we're starting with the group. You know, the group's a friendly place. One friendly project at a time. Look what I'm doing. Maybe you like it too. I do think that technology is supporting us to grow the message. I do think that for a while, upcycled is going to be trendy and cool. I also feel we might be heading into a chaotic world where upcycling might one day become necessary as resources become fewer. I don't know, unless we all just walk around in plastic. Polyester's a thing. Yes. Yeah, I think textile upcycling is becoming more fun because we can do it together in groups. We can learn from each other. We don't have to work in silos anymore. We don't have to be that freak in the family. We can find other freaks online who we can hang out with. So I think in that respect, it's changing in a friendly way. The government could help, and I don't think it's their focus. I don't think it's their focus at all. If the clothing industry was a focus of the government, we'd know about it by now. Clearly, we are not a priority. And, it's a big picture. When governments talk about things, they make deals, Okay, we'll give you textiles, we'll take all the money. It's like that. So it's a really big picture thing. And I still feel that the consumer has control. The consumer drives the market. If the consumer will make a different choice and say, we don't want cheap imports, we want locally made, we want to support local artisans, then it doesn't matter what the government says, because the consumer is driving appropriate behavior. So I heard, I can't remember where I heard it the other day. I think it was on a radio show or something. Someone was saying that if we get like those digital outfits, so you just press the switch and it's got you dressed for the day and it's a holographic outfit, okay, would they use it? And they said, no, they absolutely would not, because what if it fails? And you're standing there in the emperor's new clothes. So I think that it's still going to be a long time before we move away from traditional clothing. And also that all the fancy new things that they're bringing in really are only affordable to the wealthy. Your everyday person who needs to dress a brand new baby is going to go to close nearby sources that are cheap. And that's not going to change. So I think that the clothing industry is going to stay the same in a lot of ways. The one thing that we have seen is over the last 10, 15 years, most natural fiber fabrics have disappeared completely. Everything's polyester, nylon, man-made blends. They don't have the same longevity that the old fabrics had. So I can see what's going to happen is, especially as this thrifting thing trends, more and more people are going to use up the old resources in the thrift stream. And then we're going to start being left with the stuff that's been produced in the last 15 years. And then what's going to happen is we're going to have a shortage of strong, old, useful textiles, which I think will make the older textiles even more valuable and collectible than what they already are. I've had so many people help me. I have had so many people help me. So entrepreneurship is learning to receive and learning to understand when you're receiving. I've had helps from so many people. So the Cloth Collective has 113,000 members and there are 10 volunteers who Keep out spammers, scammers, and anybody mean. And if you think about those 10 volunteers showing up every day for no money, to just hold that safe space for us. I don't have words. I cannot express enough gratitude for that team. I've had mentors. I've had business mentors along the way. I have to thank Alon Reyes of Reyes Corp. I was in his business incubator for 4 years, and what I learned there I will always use. I have to thank Colleen Jack. I have a personal development coach who I've worked with for 15 years. Longer, 15 years. And she's been incredible. She's really helped to keep me on track, held me accountable to my own personal improvement along the way. Oh my goodness, how many online mentors that I've found. Sharon Barton, oh my goodness, Sharon Barton. I don't know what I would do without her. Sharon Barton is our volunteer in our admin team who, she's our spin doctor. When stuff goes bad, she just fixes it. When the team doesn't know what to do and I'm sleeping, she comes in and she sorts everything out. And when we had a log jam with the website now, she was like, get all the service providers out of the way and I'll fix this. So it's giants like those that I have somehow magically surrounded myself with. My meta mentors, Facebook. I know a lot of you out there think that Facebook is a very sinister space. The people I've met who work at Facebook are all very nice. And I adore them. And I have some very, very close personal relationships with some of them. They are amazing people. They mean well, even though sometimes they get it wrong. I think that Facebook is an incredible opportunity. It is the most enormous social experiment we've ever had the opportunity to participate in. And I think if you're not, you're missing opportunities. And I think that from a world-changing perspective, Facebook is the most powerful tool that we've got, because anybody who has an idea for being the change they want to see in the world can just put that idea out there, find a bunch of people who feel the same and grow it. So I think it's a magical tool, and thank you, Facebook, Meta, and Mark Zuckerberg.